Okay, well, our next presentation is going to be on the Book of Mormon, and before I introduce the person who's going to be giving that presentation, I'd just like to invite you to check out a great resource we have on the Book of Mormon on our website. It's under our Fair Mormon Study Aids project, and you can access that directly from our home website. The homepage. It's just right there, one of the main icons, Fair Mormon Study Aids. We've got a verse-by-verse catalog of all the scholarship available on the Book of Mormon, or as much as we've been able to collect up to this point. We continue to try and keep that updated, and that's a resource we plan on expanding in the future to other parts of the standard works, especially the Book of Abraham, Doctrine and Covenants and Church History, as well as the Old and New Testaments. And so those are great resources. If what you hear in this presentation gets you really excited, then go check that out, and you'll see that there's a lot more where this came from. And with that said, let me introduce to you Robert F. Smith. He is an alumnus of BYU and has advanced training in archaeology and Near Eastern languages at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, UCLA, and Cal State University Long Beach. He was the first editor of Farms's Book of Mormon Critical Text Project from 1997 to 1987. Oh yeah, that's right, 1979 to 1987. Thank you. Robert Smith, everybody.
Thank you and good morning. This is the first PowerPoint presentation I've ever given, so I'm going to try my best. Please bear with me. Is that too close? Okay. Okay. Oh, great. The title of my presentation is taken from the words of Betty J. Stevenson, a faithful Mormon and longtime Relief Society president of her Oakland, California branch and then ward. There she is. I was born in Oakland, California, by the way. This was her first impression of the Mormon religion at age 39 when the missionaries came to her house. Could you cue that for me, please? There's a play button. You need to click on that. We actually tried this before, and it worked. Yeah, if you just go down and put your cursor on that play button down at the lower left.
And they came in and told me the most preposterous story I have ever heard in my life. They told me about this white boy, a dead angel, and some gold plates. And I thought, I wonder what they own.
Now, Sister Stevenson is not the only person ever to express the frank and honest view that the story of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon is preposterous and unbelievable, much as the biblical stories of the Israelite Exodus and of Jesus are also preposterous. A notion seriously advanced by some evangelical Christians, but especially by anti-Christians, based in the latter instance largely on the extraordinary miracles and perceived discrepancies within the Bible. Now, this is not the place to address the many anachronisms or discrepancies to be found in the biblical text, except to say that they far outnumber the claimed anachronisms of the Book of Mormon. I'm about to publish a book which addresses both Bible and Book of Mormon difficulties in great detail. What I want to say here is that the preposterous nature of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon is a singular advantage. Why? Because if the Book of Mormon cannot possibly be true, based on the unbelievable nature of its coming forth, all the more reason to accept it as authentic when careful analysis of the text, along with comparison of it with archaeology, linguistics, and history, shows it to be based on empirical secular reality. That is, despite all that might be said against it, the preponderance of hard evidence shows the Book of Mormon to be authentic, to be an authentic ancient document. For according to Thomas Bayes' theorem for calculating probabilities, the preponderance of evidence is enough in such improbable cases to establish likelihood, a likelihood which should be impossible. After all, both Bible and Homeric epic were transmitted to us by ordinary secular means, being copied by scribes for thousands of years. Both describe actual ancient civilizations which are known to have existed. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and other nations certainly existed. And they even mention biblical figures. This does not tell us in either case whether the miracles described in those texts actually occurred, but the lesson should be clear. The preposterous nature of the Book of Mormon, or the origin of the Book of Mormon, turns that situation upside down and provides the singular advantage that the verifiable systematic claims in the book not only make it likely to be authentic, but also explicitly buttress the miraculous claims of the Bible. And this is an extraordinary legacy of what has rightly become a second witness of Jesus Christ. This should not be taken to denigrate the faith of those who know the Book of Mormon to be true through the witness of the Holy Spirit. Sister Betty Stevenson herself accepted the Book of Mormon on that basis, as have millions of others. Jesus himself praises Peter for his acceptance of the truth by revelatory rather than by worldly evidence in Matthew 16:17. Blessed art thou, Shimon bar Yonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. At the same time, I agree with, that's the wrong way. I agree with Carl Sagan, who says that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We have that extraordinary evidence, and I brought some of it here with me this morning. Following are several items which I believe provide empirical verification of the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Some have been published, some have not. All are based on realia rather than on theological or faith considerations. This is merely a sampler, if you will, and I won't be able to get through the entire paper, although the entire paper will be online. At the outset, as a prime example of what I am discussing here, I highly recommend John Sorensen's magnum opus, Mormon's Codex, an ancient American book, the cover of which you can see on the screen. It is well written and is dedicated to very specific scholarship showing that the Book of Mormon fits tightly into the archaeological, chronological, ethnographic, and cultural sequence of certain Mesoamerican civilizations. The only place in the Americas in which such advanced civilizations existed, having writing, astronomy, major cities, huge populations, and technology such as described in the Book of Mormon. That is hard evidence, and a free detailed summary of the Sorensen volume is available online, and you can find it on the Fair Mormon website, for example. Sorensen does in this massive volume what anthropologists normally do. Rather than focus on only one artifact or phenomenon, they utilize systems analysis, the use of complex, synchronic or diachronic, and multivariate systems or processes, which can only be discerned via multidisciplinary means. I'll begin here with an entirely parenthetical entry in the midst of a story about lawyers, judges, and bribery, which the editor, Mormon, encloses within the same basic phrase. Alma 1032. Now the object of these lawyers was to get gain, and they got gain according to their employ. With Alma 1120, now it was for the sole purpose for to get gain, because they received their wages according to their employ. These inclusios frame the Nephite weights and measures to be found in Alma 11:3 to 19. And I'll display those here. If you can't see this too well, it'll be published, but this summarizes the Nephite weights and measures system as it's been understood for a number of years. It includes the 6 auntie bribe, shows how many grain measures that amounts to, and the various names of the silver and gold measures that the Nephites used. In Alma 11:4 it states that these values and names are given by the Nephites, for they did not reckon after the manner of the Jews which were at Jerusalem. Neither did they measure after the manner of the Jews, but they shared their reckoning, they altered their reckoning. I guess I should read it from the screen. And their measure according to their minds, the minds and circumstances of the people in every generation until the reign of the judges. We will test those claims that it was so different, and at the same time provide a good example of systems analysis, though not presented in the Sorensen book, by a close examination of that very limited data on weights and measures delivered in just 15 verses of Alma 11. In comparison with the known system in use in Judah, Israel, and Egypt in the 7th and 8th centuries BC, in other words, contemporary with Lehi. And here you can see, for a start, some weights traditionally used in Egypt to weigh out scraps or ingots of gold, silver, and copper in payment for other items. It will be seen here that this aspect of the Egyptian system is decimal in nature, although there are other non-decimal systems used in ancient Egypt. And this is the basis of what we want to compare. This was the kind of system used in New Kingdom late and Demotic periods in Egypt. And want to focus on the silver diban and the silver kite. And it gives you the weights right there. 9.1 grams for 1 kite and 91 grams for 10 kite, which is equivalent to New Kingdom diban. Famed archaeologist William Deaver points out first that the Egyptian decimal system is recalibrated in base 8 by the Israelites, but with the same ratios and designated by the same Egyptian hieratic numerals, so that an Egyptian hieratic 10 is marked on Israelite 8 shekel weights. You might have a hard time seeing this. This gives you the equivalence of the Egyptian kite and the Israelite shekel. Now, 1 kite and 1 Israelite shekel don't weigh the same. An Israelite shekel weighs about 11 grams, and the Egyptian kite weighs about 9.1 grams. But 10 kite and 8 shekels weigh exactly the same. And that's why we're going to speak about the what Deaver speaks as the 8 shekel module, because from 8 shekels on up, the weights are exactly the same as the Egyptian 10 kite. As long as you see that it's being made in base 8 notation as opposed to the base 10 of the decimal system of the Egyptians. Deaver notes that the Israelite basic module here was the 8 shekel weight. We can thus arrange the same chart that you see here in Egyptian diban terms, so that 1 diban exactly equals one 8 shekel weight. And you can see how the ratios are exactly the same. This gives you a easier to read projection of what that means. It looks like the 8 times tables. 2 times 8 is 16, 3 times 8 is 24, and so on up the line. This is a photo of some Israelite limestone dome shekel weights. They're rounded, they're flat on the bottom so that they can fit on the pan of the scales. And you can't see it in that photo, but each of them is marked with the shekel sign and the amount of the weight written in hieratic Egyptian. Furthermore, the hieratic numeral used by the Israelites to represent each unit are the same as Egyptian usage, but recalibrated such that the Egyptian hieratic 5 is used by the Israelites on their 4 shekel weight. And the symbol doesn't turn out very well here. It's actually a loop. It means shekel. Here the sign didn't transfer over to the system very well. Here you get an example of the hieratic signs that are used. In the case of the Egyptian kite, 5 in the hieratic numbers is used on a 4 shekel weight, and a hieratic 10 is used on the 8 shekel weight and on up the line. You don't have a 32 shekel weight, and you don't have a 48 or 56 shekel weight, because in the set of weights that they used, they could simply add them together to make 32 or 48 or 56. If you wanted a 56 shekel weight, for example, you simply take your 40 shekel weight and combine it with your 16 shekel weight, and that amounts to 56. Here's an archaeological drawing of some of these limestone shekel weights. You can see them, the cross section as well as the writing on top, and you see the loop. The loop sign is the shekel sign. It's a word in Egyptian meaning linen, or it has several different meanings, but shesh is for shekel, and almost like B as in boy or B as for boat. That's the way they wrote it. One symbol, and then next to it is the number. Focus on just one of them, number 7. You can see here it says shekel, and then the number 10. Well, 10 in hieratic means 8 for the Israelites. And all of their limestone weights, there are hundreds of these limestone weights that have been recovered, and they are very tight in their weights. There's about a 0.5% deviation in the weights, 0.5% percent deviation, which is pretty tight, pretty good. And here's how the Nephite weights correlate. Now, some of you may have noticed that there's a great similarity between the Egyptian, Israelite, and the Nephite systems. And you can see them here as they are represented in the Book of Mormon. There is a 12 shekel weight. Only one has been found, but if there's only one found by archaeologists, you can be sure there are others. And it's marked with a 15 in hieratic, and it matches up with the Nephite 12 leah, or 1.5 measures weight, which is called an antion in the Book of Mormon. And then, of course, you get the other measures. Only the nomenclature is basically different. The Nephites called most of them by very different names, but not completely different. And the weight value of the Hebrew 8 shekel weight of 91 grams is 1/7 of a mina. And we'll get to that measure after we take another look very quickly here, so it's easier to see how these weights match up. If you list it by Egyptian Deban, and you take the Israelite 8-shekel module, you can see how they're nearly identical. It's just a question of choice of which measures you include in your weight set. As Bill Deaver argues in his demonstration of the Egypticity of the Israelite system, ratio and proportion is the thing. The Israelites being free to adapt earlier systems to their own needs without hindrance from any formal Egyptian practice. Thus, this 8th and 7th century BC Israelite system redefines or recalibrates use of the Egyptian hieratic decimal numerals 5, 10, 20, 30, and 50 as equivalent to the 4, 8, 16, 24, and 40 inscribed on their own shekel weights. Below the 8 shekel weight are the fractional weights 1, 2, and 4, which do weigh less because they're not part of the base 8 system. Skip over that. The Israelites knew what they were doing because we have another system of weights called the gera, which is much smaller than the shekel. And on those particular weights, they use the hieratic numerals at face value in decimal fashion. So that's an interesting sidelight. The Bible contains no hint of this. Moreover, Egyptian hieratic numerals had even been in use in late Bronze Age Canaan, Ugarit, and Phoenicia, long before the Israelites came on the scene, even though in a differing style of hieratic. The Israeli scholar Raz Kletter says, quote, "The reform of the inscribed Judean weights was probably initiated by state officials or scribes using first millennium BC anormal hieratic script, but sometimes written in a peculiar way." We have a comparative table, which is probably difficult to read for some of you, which simply shows all of what I've been saying here across the board so that you can see readily how they compare to one another. And in particular with the mina weight, which is in the Bible it's called a mana, but for ancient Near Eastern discussions it's always called the mina. And you can see how they compare with one another. It's really extraordinary how closely they fit. And another comparative table, which includes the Horusai fractions, which are used both for grain measures as well as pharmaceutical measures. Those particular fractions also match up fairly nicely. This is from my 1998 table of relative values, which I had in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies. And I've edited it a little for this presentation. You can see all this online. The Hebrew didn't transfer over. Anyway, the mana in the King James Bible means the mina, and it literally means weight. Mana means either count or weigh. A lot of measure terms either mean round or weigh or something like that. The word shekel itself means weight. And this didn't transfer over either. Anyway, this is one of the terms in the Nephite record. Shilum, which means repayment or recompense, and you can find that biblically in Isaiah, Hosea, and Micah. It's quite interesting that happens to be virtually identical to the Hebrew term. In current books of Mormon from 1830 until now, they spell it shiblum, which is a mistake. The manuscripts all have shilum. And again, the diacritics and the Hebrew didn't transfer over, but in biblical Hebrew, there's a word se'ah, which means measure, which at Elephantine is pronounced se'an. Turns out that se'an is the word in Alma 11 for measure, which is probably the identical word. At least I think that's a pretty good case. And then, turn the page here. Of special interest also are the various Assyrian-style lion weights found in Palestine at Ein Shemer, Hatzor, Tel Jemeh, and Arad, and one of unknown provenance in the Hecht Museum in Haifa, Israel, because of Hugh Nibley's suggestion that Book of Mormon Shiblon may be derived from the Arabic word for lion cub, shibble, together with the Old Semitic nominal termination on. And these are a couple of the drawings from those findings archaeologically. In addition, although I didn't get them on here, there is an Egyptian term from the 19th and 20th dynasties for the basic silver unit of value called a seniu. It's in the system of pricing for commodities. And the late Egyptologist Jaak Janssen thought that that was taken from an Egyptian word senu or seneni, meaning price. And I suggest that the etymology of sinum and sinine come from that very word because not only was it the basic silver unit of value in ancient Egypt, but it turns out it's the basic silver and gold unit of value in the Nephite record as well. And if that's the case, it's also helpful to think of the mane, which I had here, would be the total of the system, because not only is it the same at the same place, the same weight as the Israelite and Egyptian systems, but the mina is very close phonologically to the Nephite word limna, which is the very one that is supposed to be the total. And I think I have that in the comparative table. You can see here how the 7 Dibans and the let me look at my own chart here, having trouble reading that at the distance. The 7 C9s or sinums comes right up to the same number, and that's where we have the mina weight, which is an extraordinary coincidence, or maybe that's what it was supposed to be. Now, there is a guy who has come along and commented that his belief is that the entire system in Alma 11 is taken from American bits, which have their origin in, for example, the Spanish dollar, which we have a photo of here, the peso de a ocho. This is an 1821 minting of that particular Spanish dollar. These silver dollars would be chopped up into 8 pieces, and that would be your pocket change. 2 bits would be 25 cents, 4 bits would be 50 cents, and 8 bits would be your dollar. And that continued in colonial and early United States usage for a long time, since we didn't have the minting capacity that the Empire of Spain had. They had very reliable minting capacity, and this is a good example of that. And this particular coin is worth 8 reales. And so Rick Grunder, who's the man who suggested this comparison as the origin, he suggested that that would be the way this would be compared. And you can see here the Spanish silver reales, including the 8 peso de a ocho, as $1 in 8 bits. It's about a 1-ounce silver coin, and how it compares to the Spanish gold escudos. And here you have a better representation, how many reales, what they're worth, and the American bit system. The problem, of course, is that he fails to note the absence of the base 8 system. All we're dealing with here are multiples, doubling, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on. That really isn't the same as the base 8 system used by the Nephites and the Israelites. Moreover, he also fails to note the absence of the 1.5 unit antion, which is crucial to the efficiency of the Nephite system. So it's best understood as an extension of the Israelite system with changes in the names and changes in probably the actual weights. We don't know what the grain measures were like. We don't know how much silver or gold, but whatever was used locally is likely to have been the case. Now, I have a lot of other examples of etymologies and other types of comparisons, but that basically concludes the metrology of the Book of Mormon, which I think compares extremely well with the Israelite system, even though they deny there's any similarity in the text. Thank you. In Alma 11:15, Shiblon is set forth. Alma named a son Shiblon. What is the meaning of the word Shiblon? You may have written this before I mentioned it, but Hugh Nibley theorizes that it's the word for lion cub in Arabic. After all, Lehi and Nephi spent 8 years in Arabia. They may have adopted that word and put an O-N ending on it. As you'll notice, many biblical names have O-N endings on them. That's just a nominal formative. And the meaning would therefore be lion cub, and it might match the experience that they might have had with weights that were made in the form of a lion or a lion cub. In order to accurately compare the Israelite and Nephite systems of measurement, we would need to know at least one equivalent measurement. What was a measure of barley, a day's worth of work in ancient times? I don't know whether we could really begin to compare the unknowns here, because we're dealing with the new world as opposed to the old world. In the old world, we actually know what a measure of grain would be, and therefore we could talk about how Israelites and Egyptians might use those kinds of comparisons in commerce. We have a whole metrology, not just of the weights, but capacity measures, both wet and dry capacity, linear measures, volumetric, cubic, and area measures. All of these are systematically known for Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Israel, and so we can compare them, but in the New World, we have no idea what those particular measures were. It's very difficult to establish them. It'd be nice if we could find a set of weights. The archaeology of Israel does leave us with hundreds of such weights, so it's easy for us to establish what they are, and it's only in recent decades that we've been able to establish that this was a very Egyptian system adopted by the Israelites, primarily because they had commerce with Egypt all the time. But we really can't say much about that. Any more questions? Thank you very much.